Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to our panel. Welcome to our panel. So we're gonna have 4 panelists talking about. Can you hear me? No. Okay. Technician? No, perfect. So welcome to our panel. We'll have 4 panelists and we want to talk about the ecosystem, compare it to international other ecosystems, and want to look into how is the innovation system in Germany and Europe doing? How can startups and corporations cooperate? What can the state do? What can universities do? How can we play this win-win? And I would like to welcome on the stage our first panelist, Stephan Seifert. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Körber AG, a leading international technology group with 12,000 employees, sales of 3 billion euros. And you cover a diverse area of businesses, logistics, pharma, tissue, tobacco, and Körber Digital. And I would like to invite you to say a few words about the ecosystem from the perspective of an industrial corporate. Please give a warm applause.
Thank you, Isabell. Hello, thank you, Isabell. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I would like to take then the chance. You asked me to give a few words on motivation to be on stage today. First of all, I'm very happy today to have the opportunity to discuss that topic with Isabell and 3 excellent and very successful startups. And why is the reason that I'm happy to do it? Körber's motivation, my personal motivation today to support this talk is that maybe first of all a more general statement. I strongly believe, and to have this, to also support the motto of this conference, being optimistic, I strongly believe that Europe and Germany still have the opportunity to build a leading ecosystem in the B2B world. Unlike what has been discussed earlier in the meetings, that the B2C race for the time being looks that it has been lost to China and the US, Europe still has a chance. Why? A few words, and maybe also later on topic to discussion is, we have a very strong industrial base. Many of our corporates in Europe are global world leaders. Second, we have a high infrastructure in terms of science, innovation. We have a high degree of innovation culture in Europe. And third, over the last years, Europe and Germany has developed an excellent platform to host and to start and to grow startups. Second, that is my pure own interest as being responsible for the group. I strongly believe for our group, and I would make that statement for many industrials in Europe, that the leading technology, the leading position we have today in our markets refers many times to the technology we own and the technology we have. Market leadership by technology leadership in 2025 will require a different technology stack. Today, when I say different technology stack, maybe you have the chance to speak about this a little bit. And third, and this is also my own experience from Körber, we are quite successful in cooperating with startups that can help us a lot and where we can contribute a lot actually to also foster and support their business plan. And I look forward to get any questions also from you later on. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Now let's hear the perspective of the startups, and I'd like to call on stage Wolfgang Stelzle. He's the CEO and founder of Reflect, Europe's leading augmented and mixed reality enterprise ecosystem, collaborating with Bosch and others. And Wolfgang is also the chairman of the group called Startups in the Economic Council of Germany. Please welcome Wolfgang on stage.
I'm very happy to attend this panel here. I'm trying to give 2 perspectives. As Isabell said, I'm founder myself. We deal with business-to-business customers. We partner with them in joint developments. And we also have 3 corporate VCs in our company, Bosch, BASF, and Prosegur. On the other hand, I'm chairman of that Federal Commission for Startups in the Economic Council. And the hypothesis is that, as Stephan said, the business-to-consumer race, we have to be honest, is lost to the Googles and Facebooks of the world. But we have strength when we talk about business-to-business. So we need to think about how can we leverage industrial corporate partnerships with startups. And that's what we do and what we focus on in that group to improve the German ecosystem. To set the stage a little bit for this panel here, I want to elaborate why corporates are so important for startups. And whilst there's a lot of different reasons, I want to highlight on 3. The first is getting early market feedback. So getting feedback about your use case, the return of invest, and improve your product on an MVP basis. The second is actually create traction. Because you need revenue, you need customers to get some more funding. And the third is, with corporate, startups can also scale, not only in terms of customer relationships, but also in terms of partnerships, multipliers, system integrators, and so on. But also a little bit, I want to give a little bit of a provocant statement here, because dealing with a lot of corporates, I also know about the problems. And here I want to highlight 3 problems. I think corporates struggle with an immature culture of perseverance. Not only startups are afraid of failing, and I think in Germany and Europe we generally have a problem with failing, but in corporates my experience is that the fear for failure is really slowing us down when you talk about cooperating with startups. Which brings me to my second point is speed and agility. I want to give an example. One customer of us negotiated for 1 year about a 7,000 euro pilot. We discussed with security departments, we had to get an audit, we discussed with purchasing department, we had to get several license agreements in place. It took 1 year for a 7K pilot. Jesus. Second, the third is professional competence and mindset. I believe on the startup side, we need to understand how do corporates think. But on the other side, if corporates want to partner with startups, they also have to make sure they know about the tools, they know about the mindsets of startup to ensure that startups and corporations can work fast and agile together. So I'm really looking forward to that panel here, add my experience and have hopefully fruitful and also controversial discussions.
Perfect. Cool. Okay, and finally, I would like to call Marco and Frederik on stage. Marco Costa runs Talkdesk's operations in Europe, and Talkdesk is a cloud-based contact center software provider. Hello, Marco. And we can applaud. And Fredrik Brandner is the CEO of Magazino, a startup that builds mobile robots for intralogistics, and you're also trying to develop an operating system for that. And I heard you just won a prize for Best Digital Startup at Spark. Welcome, Fredrik.
Thank
you. So Fredrik and Marco, we just heard from Stephan and Wolfgang about the industry and the startup perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
Good.
You go.
Well, I think it can only work together. Because a startup alone only selling to startups would not work. So you need to have somehow the connection to somebody else. But I do see some of the issues you were telling about. Like I have a similar story. We were having a project and a contract with a large car manufacturer from Bavaria. So there are 2, so you don't know who it was. And we had a written contract, and then the purchasing department wasn't happy that their terms weren't included, and so they just did not pay. And they didn't pay until the moment that we signed another contract with their terms. And then you had 90 days of payments, etc. So this is something I think where it has to be a mind change as well in terms of how you cooperate on a supply chain version.
Yeah. So let me tell a bit about 5 seconds about Talkdesk, because probably that will help understanding where we come from. So Talkdesk is the first native cloud-based solution for contact center, which is a very old space. People believe contact center, really? Isn't that dead? Reality is, no, it's not. It's really live. And what we provide to customers, to our customers, is the ability to interact with their customers. And if you think, okay, that's interesting, but when you go e-commerce, when you go to digital, basically there's no other way, or there's not really other ways to talk to your customers, so you have to somehow have this kind of platform to engage. And if you think the industry that has players that have been around for 30 years, they basically own the space. When a startup like us, that was founded 7 years ago, come on board and start discussing, oh, we can do this differently. You guys took 6 months to deploy. We do it in 6 weeks. Guys, seriously? And then you say, look, why don't we go with the big guy? What's the motivation to go with a young startup like us in the beginning? So we had to kind of keep pushing, and eventually we got to a point where today we have 1,000+ customers around the world. We just finished our Series B with $100 million, with a $1 billion+ valuation that put us on this unicorn status. And that's when really the companies, the big companies, start looking at us with a different eyes. But it took a long time for us to capture that attention. Even if you have a strong value proposition, if you can show by numbers that was really interesting, for sure we can find companies that were more early adopters that would understand, yeah, I love that, let's start. We also have the stories of the 1-year pilot. We tend to not go after them because it's a 1 year. We just go for the ones that can keep us going. But in the end, we eventually found people that believe in us. And those people were an early adopter, someone at the company that was a champion, someone that you don't really partner with a big company. We partner with someone inside the big company that put trust in you and helps you get going.
So, Marco, can you talk a bit about your relationship with Salesforce? And you were very successful in an old industry, and what can you tell us about how you work together with big companies like Salesforce?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting story. So Salesforce, we raised our first money 4 years ago, and Salesforce was an investor. And everybody says, okay, now you guys are done. So you have Salesforce, that's awesome. Why is that? Because Salesforce, they give it's a huge CRM, they give all the 360 view of the customer, but they lack something, which is the voice channel. That's what we're doing. So we were doing the voice channel, so it's a perfect fit. That's done. Guess what? That's already not easy. So of course it helps. It's a validation, but then you still have to put your people on the ground and do a lot of FaceTime with account executives of Salesforce to go together to customers. And then they'll have the same questions as everybody else, all the others, which is, okay, why you guys? What do you have to offer? Show me references. That's the big one. Show me references. Oh, you don't know my industry. My industry is different. Of course, now I have IBM. I have Dropbox, but I go to industry. Oh, you don't have a lot of references there, so you don't know what my industry looks like. So we have to go one by one and go with each account executive, spend time with them, explain, look, if we go together, there's some advantages. If we go together, we can actually do a proper demo to the customer of your own product and show how our workflow will work with voice. Oh, that's interesting. Let's go together. And then when you do 1 and 2 and 3 successful things, then you might get to a point where they call you back. Look, Marco, we have a deal. Do you want to come with us? So let's go together because we might need you to help us doing this demo. And when you get to that point, you think, now I got it. And then you go to another country or to another vertical, you have to start again from scratch. So big companies, they are big, and they probably sometimes have communication problems. For sure, it helps when you have the references, but don't fool yourselves, you have to go again and build it from scratch.
Now, the topic of this panel is to think about how we can overcome the innovation winter that Germany and most part of Europe is actually in. And we think a key is that we have to create the ecosystems we see in other parts of the world. I'd like to ask that really to all panelists. How can Germany, German Mittelstand, German family-owned businesses, the corporates, how can they tap into the innovative potential supplied by the startups we see here, and what would be the main leverages? In my opinion, it's a complete paradigm shift away from what made German industry successful, to be close, to have secrets, to have patents, to make the best technology, to focus on your own firm. Whereas now we're in times where you have to open up, you have to share, you have to talk about your interfaces, you have to care not just about your firm, your whole ecosystem, and you sometimes even have to give your patents away to let others innovate with you. What are your thoughts on that, and is it possible to be optimistic in thinking that we can achieve that? Maybe Stephan, you start.
Yeah, what you're describing is maybe, and I think what we all sense is that we have the feeling that for a certain reason we don't feel the same motivation, enthusiasm, and readiness to take risk as we might see it and experience it in the US or in China, for instance.
I can just provide the statistics. The favorite profession of German graduates is to become a civil servant in 2018. Yes.
Frankly speaking, I make the reference case for our own company, but I can share that speaking to other peers, we all make the same experiences. We have made the same experience over the last 12, 24, 36 months. Our position, we are, let's say, focusing on specific niche markets, and our market position is determined on, let's say, technology, innovation, and process leadership. And what we realized is really dealing with digitization, exposing ourselves to the startup communities in the US and China and here in Europe. We realized that the current technology stack that is allowing us to stay in a market-leading position and being a global leading company will not remain the same technology stack that is needed in 2025 to be in a market-leading position. To make it a little bit more tangible for you is, I mean, we live a lot of process machinery equipment to industries, to the, let's say, B2C industries. And we have redefined our technology stack. Today, we are very good in building machines, providing process equipment, automation technology, thinking ahead, seeing what technology is around. We believe that in 2025, in order to maintain our technology position, we need to own 3 technology layers. That is our current technology layer, that is operating software, but smart operating software, and then it's on top, we call it the industrial IoT tech layer. And we believe that we need to, let's say, be able to offer it, understand it, and here comes the first but. And you asked the question, we realized already that we will not be able to own it. We will not be able to own it because we don't understand the technology appropriately. We do not have the money and the funds actually to buy it, to share with you. We invested in the last 24 months 800 million euro in software and IoT companies to buy them and to take partnership to get access to perceive from our point of view the technology that is needed to be ahead in 2025. But you cannot do this, we cannot do this on a continuous base. And I think you have a very good statement, I think we could also be a representative case. We come from, let's say, a very traditional approach in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where German companies have the tendency to protect IPs. And listening to all of you, I think you make still the same experience. And I think that requires a cultural shift that the new technology stack cannot be owned by one company. And it's a very difficult approach that we take in our company to create a comfort feeling that we need to open ourselves, as you describe, to companies like you are here and here in the audience to have a common innovation process.
Can I ask you, how do you do that as the CEO? How do you make people in the company open up and change the culture and their beliefs?
To be very honest, I think you don't do this by PowerPoint and you don't do it by speeches. Our experience of the last 24 months has been, we call it now, seeing is believing. Okay. We have taken more than 100 people. In the meantime, it's, I think, up to 300 to 400 people out of the 10,000 and exposed them to the ecosystem. 1 week, of course, we also did the trips to China, to US, but not these, let's say, general trips, but very customized. And to give an idea what was really mind-blowing to the audience, at least who shared that with us, we had a trip to Andreessen Horowitz in US. We spent a day there. And I have to say, this has been up to now mind-blowing to me personally and eye-opening for all of us. It's a very, very professional VC, one of the global leading VCs who has the tremendous capability to support startups and to find the right industrial corporates to bring them together. And what they do on top is they manage very well the interaction that they do not speak, let's say, that they miss to speak in the right way. And to make a bold statement, I think Europe, Germany needs its own Andreessen Horowitz.
Okay. Frederik, what's your perspective on how Germany can overcome this innovation winter? You collaborate with German companies, with Asian investors. Can you say something about your perspective?
Well, on the one side, I don't think it's easy. And I don't think that when you look into the States, that they are so much better incorporating when the B2B business has to work together with startups. When you talk about GE, for example, is not better incorporating with startups than maybe German companies. So the ones who are really good at already have a different mindset. I think this is a one thought, so that the mindset of the corporates and have to change first and maybe have to be different type of company, then they are open to talk to startups and work with them. And if they don't do this as a first step, then it's very difficult to bridge. We have all kind of experiences. We have we have Siemens as an investor. We have a mid-sized large player as Körber as investor. We have Zalando as a investor, and we have an Asian investor, and they're completely different. And Fiege as a family-owned business, and all of them have differences, right? For example, Fiege, it's very fast because there's just two people deciding, and you have a direct contact. With Zalando, when we went to the notary public, they didn't even send a lawyer. We signed on their behalf, right? Think about Siemens would not send their own lawyer to a notary public appointment. So there are differences how they are approaching it. I think what we realized is that at the end, it's about the people, and it's about the other person on the other side. It doesn't matter how big the corporate is. It doesn't matter how small or how family owned it is. It's about the person on the other side, and it's when it's investment or whether it's a project, there has to be a personal relationship, and I think this is fundamental, and I think this is the basis of life, and it's also the basis of business. It's so simple, and I think this is where we have to go out, and this is why events like this are important, because you have to meet people to build trust, and on trust you can then build an investment or a project.
Frederik, I agree that other big companies in other countries sometimes also struggle in cooperating with startups, but we do see empirically in Germany is that the German startups in the digital area that we do have are more often acquired by firms from outside Germany. So it's not the German firms that are the first to look at these startups, that know them, that are in contact with them. And we in Germany differ in one regard, at least with other countries. Unlike the US or Israel or China, we cannot rely on digital startups to manage digital transformation for us, because simply they don't exist in enough quantity and growth. We have to rely on our established firms, Mittelstand, family-owned businesses, corporates, to succeed. And in order to succeed, you need to innovate, to garner productivity. And to refer back to what you said, Stephan, I like the approach you say, seeing is believing. What I see is when I go to these tech conferences and innovation conferences, I've often wondered why I don't see many board members of the established companies listening, sitting, joining in the ecosystem, making contacts, informing themselves. At university, we see that we have companies sitting on the laps of our IT professors and researchers, but it's not German firms, it's Chinese and US firms. And when I talk to corporates, I'm often, it's a personal anecdotal experience, I'm surprised that many of them do not know the ventures that exist in their own industry. When you can so easily look this up going through AngelList or Crunchbase or all these other public lists, that could easily be done. So I'm turning to you, Wolfgang. Do you have an explanation for this, or a solution that could give us optimism?
I don't have the explanation, but I would fully agree that it probably comes down to 2 points. The first one is leadership. I mean, it's the people, what you say. If you want to, in a large corporation, if you want to establish a partner ecosystem with startups, it has to be driven by the leadership, by the top management. People who drive the partnership have to be encouraged to spend money and sometimes to fail. And yes, the money is gone then, but it has to be driven by the leadership. And then second is, for leadership, you also need to have knowledge about the tools, knowledge about the ecosystem. And when you don't have that knowledge, you can't drive that topic. So it's to the leadership to gain that knowledge and to bring it into the organization. And one solution I would have for that, and that's something I'd like to work on with people in the people at DLD here or in the Federal Commission, is to maybe establish a best practice guide. Yeah, to a best practice guide to deliver to leaders in corporations and startups, to give them the knowledge to then drive that topic forward. That could be one thing, but it has to be then transported by top media across the whole country or across whole Europe.
Yeah. Maybe to add or to respond, because we have shared a little bit up front on the experience. From our side, I mean, we were introduced as a small to medium-sized group. I think I agree. The digital transformation is one of the preconditions, I mean, in corporates to prepare yourself to deal with startups. Second experience, from our point of view, you cannot just outsource it to your new digital department. Because, I mean, then you have enthusiastic digital department people, or even if it's a, let's say, own part of the business, if there's no commitment from the rest of the business to use it and actually to be risk prepared. The biggest move we made internally, get acceptance, is when we, let's say, added digital leadership capabilities throughout the classical leadership team. So, I mean, classical means our current business. We added 2 new board members coming from the digital world and the new business model world. And we are adding digital leaders in our current business in the leadership team. Otherwise, I think what Wolfgang is explaining, our business, including myself, we miss the understanding what the technology is all about and what that potential is. And if you don't miss it, I mean, maybe to give you a little funny thing, now I can laugh about it. 2 years I was embarrassed, or 3 years. My first startup visit, the guy came in the room and said, I'm a startup for blockchain. I was there with a group, and half of the group, including me, pulled out the iPhone, and we were checking on the table what is blockchain. So you know what I'm trying to say is, you can, if you have this kind of, let's say, understanding of technology, you cannot utilize it for technology strengths, no?
I would fully agree. I think you have to have a certain knowledge in order to be able to evaluate, to attract, to even be able to communicate with startups that offer the same technology. Frederik?
Maybe 2 add-ons. I think one is that a lot of German business are just doing too well at the moment, that they have the energy or capacity to take, like, even look into other things because they're too busy. And then, in my extent, they sometimes have the wrong impression on how fast technology is coming on the one side and how long it sometimes lasts something is working. So I recently been at a blockchain talk, and then there was a very proud CEO of a company saying, well, we do blockchain now as well, but we stopped IoT, that didn't work. And I think that was the best statement for how, how they look into technology, that they think, okay, the one we tried out, and if it doesn't work, we go to the next one, and not understanding that fundamental change which is happening there.
Marco.
On that, and also what you said, I think there's a transition going on in terms of systems of systems. It's been there forever, but now it's more and more, which is we cannot control the full technology. You cannot, even us, which is a startup, we cannot control the full technology. There are companies that are specialized in things that we need. For instance, talk about voice analytics, talk about specific pieces that we need for our job. We cannot compete because they just do that, and they own that part. So assuming that we cannot own the full technology, we have to own the process, and we have to go into these big organizations and also do some education, explaining that you will not be able to own the technology. You have to get yourselves ready to, if something fails, you will have a small piece that fails and you can plug in another one. And that's a huge transition for the people that's running, from my experiences, people that is running the IT organizations and the business organizations. So am I not going to be able to control this? I'm not going to be able to basically manage the entire technology stack. So, and this is what's been working with us is a lot of education. So people come to us and say, you have to provide us everything. I said, no, we just do this. So we can work with you and explain you how you build the entire thing, but we're not going to help you with the other stuff. We just provide some free consulting, explaining where should you go. And then some couple of months later, they go, and the management team, not even the leadership team, they just go, do some work, they learn, and then come back and get support to present the project up. That takes time, but it's an education process that has to happen.
Stephan and others, you have expressed some optimism that Germany, Europe could become a digital leader in B2B businesses, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at it, of course, there are some foundations there. The strong Mittelstand, they're all market leaders in their technology niche. The technology expertise, the good education, the human talent, etc. we have here. But I would share some of that. But I'm asking myself the question, if the sort of behaviors that prevented European success in B2C are not resolved, such as not opening up, not thinking in ecosystems, not being in touch with the ecosystem, will that not prevent success in B2B? One concrete question to ask, if we think about which companies in the world could contact everyone in this room. Well, obviously DLD, yeah, but apart from that, they are not European companies. And I wonder if can we succeed in B2B if that doesn't change?
Me?
Yes,
I think there's not this just one answer to it. Maybe to share the way what we try to do. We try right now to expose ourselves as much as possible and make ourselves known to the startup world. And maybe a first thing is, and we also have a very, let's say, strong view to Asia and to the US, and maybe also a hint to any startup that is sitting here in the room. European and German startups have the tendency to substantially undersell their capabilities and substantially have an approach to, let's say, being more kind and gentle in approaching startups. If you go to the States or in China, it's a very aggressive approach towards, aggressive in terms of what kind of value they have to offer to me and to my customer. Very aggressive, very strong cases. Of course, this ecosystem is much more mature. Second, and I really would like to refer what is needed, events like this help a lot. Maybe there could be also industry-specific events, because then people get more attracted to specific solutions rather than running around to try to hope and meet somebody. But I still would like to come back to, if we speak about infrastructure, and I'm not coming now to tech things, but I still, my observation over the last 3-4 years is, especially in the last 2 years, is that a strong VC, a strong global VC can be a trigger for a strong ecosystem push and support. And I'm making the case again to Andreessen Horowitz, and I want to make the bridge to Berlin. I guess everybody here in this room has an opinion about Rocket Internet. Me as an industrial, I would say, watching them and what they have perceived, Berlin, as one of the key startup areas in Europe, would not be in that situation if Rocket Internet would not be around. They have helped a lot. They have been a lighthouse. If you walk through Berlin, and also actually our digital startup is there, it is so international. People from all over the world want to come to Berlin to be part of this ecosystem. For the time being, it's a strong B2C ecosystem, but if you start talking to some of the startups, they recognize that there's a maybe sometimes much bigger opportunity for the B2B world. And my personal pitch could only be, make sure we provide the infrastructure to have an Andreessen Horowitz, a second Rocket Internet here in Europe. And with infrastructure, you are talking about Texas? There are different things. Incentives. I mean, it's very simple. You know, I mean, speaking to Andreessen Horowitz and Kleiner Perkins, asking why don't you have a significant office in Europe? Very simple, except for London. They need to earn 2 times the money they make in the States because for the tax reasons and the burdens. Okay. So I think Peter Altmaier is here tomorrow. Okay. So will you meet? Yeah, Frederik.
You asked why we will still win or have the opportunity to win the B2B case.
Yes.
In our case, we build robots which run around in warehouses and production lines, and we gather a lot of images. So they're deciding based on what they see on 2D and 3D cameras. The data we collect there, it's about 4 gigabytes per minute per robot, is so much more than Google has now as a point of view in this industrial space. So we just recently sold a robot to Google, and we have a cooperation with them just because we gather data off inside of production sites. And I think this is something which they just don't have. They have a lot of consumer data. Yeah. They know a lot about us, but they know very little about how industrial world looks like. And if we now make use of this and leverage this and make sure that we use this within Europe, then I think the game is by far not lost. Yeah.
But we also got to take care, because when you have startups and when you have technology and when you have data, what you see these days is that then the US companies or the Chinese companies come acquire the technology and take control. So I also think that we have to be a bit more courageous in German corporates who have a little bit cash left to really invest that, to do acquisitions, to partner. In my opinion, we see that still too seldom. For strong technology companies, they just vanish. And it seems like we give up, which shouldn't be the case.
I would actually like to give the audience, we have a very full room, the opportunity, if you have any questions, we have very fun throwable microphones. Any questions? Always needs a yes. There's a brave hand right there.
Oh, sorry.
And you can signal so we can get the next microphone to you.
Hi, my name is Gil Bachach. I'm dealing since 2 years. I'm bringing startups from Israel to Germany. We build corporations, we invest in the startups. So we are very little Andreessen Horowitz. And I must say that I was really very passionate about the whole startup ideas, the whole new technology, especially in IoT. We work together with industrial Mittelstand.
Can you hold it up a bit closer to your mouth?
Yes, Mittelstand companies in Germany. And I realized that it's very easy to jump all the time on German corporations. Okay, out of the startup perspective, it's easy.
What do you mean jump on?
Like jump on, business, I mean, why don't they make more investments?
Okay.
Blame them all the time.
Okay. Oh, blame them, okay.
I learned that it's sometimes very important to go also on the startups, on the mentality of startups, to make them understand the difficulties the corporations are in. It's a totally different view. And I think, because you did not talk about this, I need to say one word to this. I learned this in the last 2 years. For me, it's a new world going into these corporations, talking with the Vorstände. It's very important what you say. I totally agree with what you said. But we forget that they still are in big competitions, even though they have high technology. They are under pressure. Yeah. Okay, things are changing in their core business every day. So they have 95% of their work is still with their everyday work. They cannot go and look for the startups and build it. We have to help the startups to understand it the same way we need to make the corporate understand the startups. So it's a two-way communication. It's not only one. And this has to be, it's a very important thing.
I would fully agree to that. I know many founders who are being very arrogant to like wandering around. We can do everything better. We're more agile. We're more flexible. Corporates don't understand. That's the easy way to do it. I fully agree with that. But that's why maybe sharing knowledge in something like a best practice guide or whatever, two-way may help for that. Don't know.
Next question right here.
Hi, David Bernardo. Thank you very much for the talk. So I work a lot in digital transformation, especially in markets in Latin America. And I'm working with several large companies that Stephan was mentioning about not knowing what blockchain is. Several of these are still wondering if they should go into e-commerce. So one of my questions is, so usually we actually start with education. I'd just suggest that we break the ice, because there's a lot of the top managers, especially if you're talking about more traditional companies, family-owned businesses, they are completely clueless, and if they are successful, they have no reason to change. So I'll just suggest that we actually go into the companies, we break the ice, and we start raising this awareness.
I guess you look at me, maybe 3 comments to this. Number one is, I mean, if you believe you have something to offer and the party is not seeing it, you need to continue, you know? You need to make yourself interesting. It's like if you want to get together, one party needs to make themselves interesting for the other. And I simply would say, keep doing. Keep doing. I mean, at a certain stage, either they get more awareness. Second, but what it really needs is the most successful setup is if the whole organization has a digital transformation agenda, not just a digital department or a VC company. And maybe if you want to generate a call for action and to share with you is my last visit to China, we were looking for a startup where we wanted to partner with, because we felt we had a very strong case in our logistics business. We are, let's say, a market leader there. And we said, look, if you want, we can take and bring you to Europe and to introduce you to our blue chip customer. And there was a startup, 5 years old, and you know what was the answer? Europe is too small to scale for us.
Wow.
Just think of this. I mean, there is such an immense, and for us, that's why I'm saying awareness, you need to have contact. And awareness, digital maturity, and this call for action for us is China, speaking about logistics, is right now the place innovating the whole business model in the logistics world. And all logistics innovation take right now place in China. We, as a small to medium-sized enterprise, I mean, we would never find these companies. So we go for companies maybe like you to help us to find them. We go to funds. We have a very strong approach. But it needs an initial incident that you trigger the leadership team for digitization. That I would describe, let's say, our development. I don't know if that helps you or...
Is there any more questions? Okay, so, oh yeah, one last question.
Hi, my name is Joram Völklein. I would disagree with some things I heard on the panel because what I hear a lot is there is a lack of innovation or management teams, they are not open for innovation. I would totally agree with what Stephan said, that we need an Andreessen Horowitz here, because what that actually means is it's not a lack of people who want to invest in innovation, but there is a lack of political will to make that investments happen. And we have a horrible, horrible environment here for investors. And we are up against China, where the government is putting money in technological innovation. We are up against America, where you have a healthy ecosystem of investors. And then we have Europe, or especially Germany, where it's an especially hostile environment for investors. And I think this is something we have to fix first. And if we have this, then innovation will come, and we will have companies, tech companies, that are competitive with Asian or US companies.
I agree.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will ask everyone one last question. Wolfgang, a key demand for legislation, in your view, would be? Okay, I'll rephrase that. If I was Germany's economic minister for a day, I would legislate?
Well, I would put the experienced people in roles to drive topics like digitization or investors or investments, and not people who come from health sector and are now responsible for digitization.
So we're talking about innovation of political systems here. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a leadership thing as well.
Yeah,
How can you lead if you don't know, if you don't have experience?
Yeah.
Blockchain is a big opportunity for Germany and Europe because it's about optimism and courage.
Because, I mean, very simple, it will be in our technology stack, it is one of the 10 layers in the industrial IoT technology stack to change a business model.
Okay. And Marco, cooperating with big companies is great and fun when?
It's fun.
It's great and fun when?
When it goes a deal.
When there's a deal, okay. And Frederik, panels are great and fun when? Panels and conferences are great and fun when?
When we end on time.
Perfect. So thanks everyone, thanks for the audience. Thank you for coming.